I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to the Insider Insight Show. I am honored to have back with me someone who is a huge fan favorite because she really focuses on freedom, financial freedom, and along with academic freedom and every kind of other freedom. But she pulls no punches. Dr. Robin McCutcheon has been a regular in our platform, and there's a reason for that. It's because of her honesty and her analysis, her depth of analysis that focuses on dealing with facts and truth and data, many of all of those that the bought off lamestream fake media never wants to discuss. But she does. And in the process, she puts you far ahead of the curve. For those of you not familiar with Dr. McCutcheon, she is an economist. She teaches economics at the Lewis College of Business at Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. She is a professor and our most favorite professor because of her honesty and her courage. She's faced a lot of blowback in the academic world. And in the process, she has inspired. I have been contacted by dozens of professors at other universities who really value her being out front on the academic freedom side of the equation for so long. And in addition to teaching her Principles of Economics course at Marshall University, which utilizes the principles of free market systems, her Comparative Economics course, which has lovingly been called the Atlas Shrugged course, by who she calls her patriots in training, her students. It's also been denigrated by her globalist, I can't even use the word progressives, uh, by her globalist colleagues in academia. Robin obtained her PhD from the Great Wayne State University. It is my privilege, pleasure, and honor to welcome back Dr. Robin McCutcheon. Robin, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thanks for inviting me back, and thanks for sharing your audience with me.
Always a pleasure. By the way, I neglected to mention your fantastic website, chock full of great information. Link lync-sync sync.com. Robin, I would like to focus our efforts today on speaking about the economic reset and where we are and where we're going. And I recently was having a conversation with somebody, and the concept of an economic reset came up. And the person looked at me and said, Dave, an economic reset is conspiracy theory. There's the economy and there's the, if you will, the financial world, but there's no reset. There, it's status quo, Dave. So, Robin, you're the PhD economist. First of all, are we in the process of muddling through an economic reset? And if so, all right, give us our status and then give us where you think things might be headed.
Okay. I think the answer is yes. We are in the process of an economic reset. And I think that we could probably pinpoint the start of that with Trump's tariff gig. Can I call it a gig? And I said before it happened, and I said while it was happening that it would work. And the reason is because the US economy dwarfs every other economy in the entire world. And that most economists said that it wouldn't work because their theory teachers taught them that way back 200 years ago, tariff theory would not work because every economy was approximately the same size. And so if England, for instance, put tariffs on incoming cotton from, say, Italy, Italy could retaliate and put tariffs on something coming from England, and the two would be a wash. But what President Trump knows is that every country wants to come to our country and send their things to our country because we are consumers of everything. And because our economy is so wide and so deep, President Trump knew that he could say to Colombia, if you want to send us coffee, we're going to put a 50% tariff on it, unless you want to do business with us, and then I could lower it to say 5%. The thing is, for the items coming into America, that for that foreign country that are sending it to us, it's a very large portion of their GDP. Once it hits our shores, it often is just a very small percentage of what we create all on our own. So we don't, for example, my favorite example is Nicaraguan sugar. Nicaragua sends us 95% of their sugar crop.
Hmm.
Once it hits our shores, it's about 2% of the entire crop of sugar that we produce here in the United States. So if you want to buy Nicaraguan raw sugar for $8 a pound, you can. Or you can buy locally produced sugar here in America for about $1 a pound. So unless you really want to spend an extra $7 on a pound of sugar, buy the Nicaraguan sugar. For Nicaragua, it is a big export. For us, it is nominal. It's a trivial amount. And so I knew when President Trump was starting these tariffs, I knew it was going to work because every country wants to send their stuff to us. So I think the economic reset starts with that,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're going to have companies from all over the world building their manufacturing, whatever it is they make. They're going to be building their manufacturing plants here, and that's going to ripple out into the labor force, and more people will have jobs. So that's like kind of the first ripple effects. Another part of the economic reset that I see coming is, and you can call me a conspiracy theorist if you want, lots of people have, but what I see is President Trump ending the Federal Reserve System. In fact, I just read today that President Trump is seriously considering firing Jerome Powell.
Mm-hmm.
Jerome Powell is the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Now, this will be very interesting because you and I both know the Federal Reserve is not federal. It is a privately owned corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And for the President of the United States to be able to fire the CEO of a privately owned corporation, I think that will make things extremely spicy. But but what it will do is it will expose the Federal Reserve System to all of the normies out there who
Mm-hmm.
don't actually realize that the Federal Reserve is privately owned. I know that there has been talk in the past, and there is continuing to be talk about central bank digital currencies. The Federal Reserve could not get their Fed Now coin off the ground. Um, and I think it's a bit of a folly for our Congress to institute any kind of a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, or any kind of a stable coin. I think what they really need to do is to just make gold and silver legal tender again,
Mm-hmm.
and then move in that direction.
That's not
Because
unheard of because constitutionally, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but when you read the Constitution, the two entities that are defined as currency in the Constitution are physical gold and physical silver, correct?
that's correct. That's right. It's just right there in part of Article 1. So I know that you and I talked before the show about Congress sort of trying to institute some sort of a stable coin or a crypto coin backed by, made me laugh, backed by US debt treasuries.
That's
And
stable.
I thought, well, there's an ethereal coin that I can't hold in my hand, backed by hot air that is debt. That's just a no-go. But I mean, President Trump, this is what I think is happening. President Trump is looking over at the BRICS system, the
Yeah.
BRICS consortium that is now about 120 countries strong. And they have their unit, which is 60% gold and 40% some other asset. So if two countries trading, each country puts in 30% gold and 20% of some other hard asset. And so already their unit, whether it's a crypto or an actual coin or a paper-based currency, their unit is already stronger than the US dollar because there's nothing but hot air behind the US dollar.
Mhm, mhm.
So I think what President Trump is doing is he sees this consortium, and I think he wants a true U.S. dollar, so a true U.S. note, call it a U.S. Treasury note that the Treasury produces, not the Fed, that is backed by gold and silver that can compete with the BRICS unit. Because I keep hearing him say, don't you threaten the US dollar. Well, we don't have a dollar.
No,
We have a Federal Reserve note.
we have vapor.
We have vapor because the cotton and linen that Federal Reserve note is printed on has no value.
Mhm.
So I think, so in the financial part and the money part of this whole reset, I think what President Trump is doing is very carefully scooching us towards having a gold-backed, silver-backed US note that will compete with the BRICS unit that all of these other countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and all of their whole consortium have agreed to use when they trade with each other. And this means, so the next ripple effect is a US note backed by gold and silver means that we will start to put ourselves on a level playing field with all the other countries on the earth. Now, that necessarily means a reset.
Yes, it does.
That's the very definition of a reset.
Well, and Robin, again, tell me if I'm wrong. Historically, the only president that I'm aware of that even attempted this was back in '63 with Kennedy, who tried to get the money printing capabilities back from the Federal Reserve that was handed to them by Congress and Woodrow Wilson in 1913 and set up a silver-backed currency issued by the United States Treasury, not the Federal Reserve. And reportedly, that was one of the reasons that led to Dallas and Dealey Plaza.
Right. I've,
Correct?
I've, I've heard that as well. Um, and it's 63 years later, we're still arguing about was it the CIA or Oswald? It doesn't really matter at this point. Part of the deep state's strategy for keeping us all enslaved is to have a central bank, a privately owned central bank that owns the money supply where we are continually paying taxes and we are enslaved by inflation. And
Mm-hmm.
so the fact that the fact that President Trump is talking about firing Jerome Powell
Hmm.
and closing down the Fed
Hmm.
and 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 sending Powell back up to Congress to explain why he perjured himself tells me that the Fed is on very, very slippery slope. Plus, we know, both you and I know, that President Trump actually put the Federal Reserve up under the Treasury at the end of February 2020.
Yeah, you're
So,
one of the very few people, actually, one of the very few, if not the only person talking about that. So
so it
refresh our listeners' memory on this because you are the one who's really dug into that, and it really is critical.
Well, at the end of February, it was actually February 29th, 2020, because that was a leap year. I saw a little note buzz past my eyeballs. It could have been Yahoo News. I don't remember exactly where, but it had a little PDF attachment, and it basically laid out all of the known gold owned by the federal government in Fort Knox, about 8,135 tons,
Mhm.
and it was valued at $35 an ounce. So this is 2020. I don't remember exactly what the price of gold per ounce was in 2020, but let's say it was somewhere around $2,500. That might be a high number. But I looked at this sheet of paper and right about the same time, I noticed another little blip go by that the Federal Reserve was put under the umbrella of the Treasury because there was I think it was a New York Times article that came out in June 2020 that said, meet your new Fed chair, Mr. Trump. And it explained the process of what the government was doing, putting the Federal Reserve up under the umbrella of the US Treasury. And so I'm putting these two things together. So I now have a sheet of paper that gives me an accounting, who knows if it's true, an accounting of the amount of gold held at Fort Knox and in the New York Federal Reserve District Bank. And they're still valuing it at $35 an ounce. And I thought, well, that's very odd.
Yeah, right.
35 bucks an ounce. Why are we not valuing it at market value?
Right.
Um, and then we hear uh, rumblings during the last part of President Trump's first term about how he really wanted Judy Shelton,
Yep. Hmm.
a known gold bug, to
Hmm.
take over the Federal Reserve chair.
Hmm.
Well, Judy Shelton is not a big Federal Reserve lover.
No,
She, she,
she wants to get rid of as much as you do.
she detests and loathes the Federal Reserve,
Yeah.
and I thought to myself, this would be great. Let's get rid of it. Nothing really came of it, but I don't think she's gone.
No.
I think she's still, maybe in the wings of this stage play we're looking at. And then today I see that President Trump is very serious about firing Jerome Powell.
Hmm.
So now I'm thinking, okay, maybe some of this is a big drama to get the people who don't really know what's going on, people who may be listening in your audience, who they don't really know what's going on with the Fed and the Treasury, and it's getting the people going in the right direction so that when the Federal Reserve is eliminated, people don't panic.
Hmm.
Because we don't want 320 million Americans panicking about, oh my God, my Federal Reserve note isn't worth dick,
Hmm.
even though it isn't right
Right.
now.
Right.
So that's another little ripple of the economic reset.
Now,
And those,
Robin, at the beginning of the Trump 2.0 administration, for a number of weeks, probably from when he was inaugurated to beginning of April, mid-April, there was this talk amongst him and Elon Musk for going to Fort Knox and doing
right,
a video presentation of them walking through it and instituting an audit, which is more than just walking through it. It's more than just opening a door and say, "Oh, look at those things. Okay, that's good. Let's look at this. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Look at that." No, it was going to be, let's assay what's there to make sure it's not coin melt, which is less pure than, you know, gold bullion per se. Uh, but which to me seemed like a great idea. But we haven't heard anything about that for like 4 months, right?
right, right.
So what do you think's happening there?
You know, this is the strangest administration I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Every day you wake up, every day you wake up, it's like, what?
It's brand new.
Yeah, right.
I
Yeah.
think sometimes President Trump dangles a little story out there.
Yeah.
See how many people glom onto it, how many people get excited, maybe to see which deep staters are shitting their pants or
Yeah,
not.
right. Right.
And then if enough people glom on, it goes to the next stage.
Yeah.
I don't think people were terribly excited about auditing the Fed, even though I was doing rah rah, let's
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I'm watching some of this stuff and I'm thinking, I think a lot of this is just sleight of hand. Like, let's put something out there and really hype it. Well, what else are they doing on the other
Yeah,
hand?
right. Right. The old
You
magician trick.
know,
Yeah.
the old magician trick. So when the Fort Knox thing came around, what else was going on? Well, Doge was being introduced,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
then and then all of a sudden it was like all eyes looked at Doge. Everyone forgot about Fort Knox.
Right.
And nobody cares about Fort Knox, but
No.
everybody's looking at Doge as they're auditing USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy, and then people started. So I think they might have been deep staters got really excited, not in a good way, about Doge going into the U.S. Treasury,
Right.
and Secretary Bessent going, "Wait a minute, I hired two of these Doge guys. They're working for me." And that really sent the deep staters off the cliff because, oh my God, they're already in the Treasury. And then they didn't want Doge to audit the Social Security Administration and Medicare and Medicaid. And, we've only got another 412 federal agencies for Doge to go through. But you and I talked about this before that those Doge guys, there had to be far more than just six.
Oh, absolutely.
And when you and I talked last time, it wasn't but a couple of weeks after that, and it turns out, oh no, there are thousands of people working with the Doge guys.
Right.
And then Elon Musk was on Ted Cruz's podcast, and he just sort of blithely says, "Oh well, we found 14 magic money computers
Hmm.
spread
Hmm.
out between the Treasury and this place and that place." And Ted Cruz said, "I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
You found what?" And Elon Musk said, "Well, we found these 14 magic money computers. They just print money,
Hmm.
or they, digitally send money to
Out of
where
thin. Yeah.
I saw that." Now, that was right around the time that the Fort Knox stuff just started fading away into the
Yes.
distance.
Very
No,
true.
nobody ever bothered to ask, okay, so who are these 14 magic money computers printing money for?
Yeah.
Who? Who's getting it? How much are they getting? And then he just sort of off the cuff, he goes, "Yeah, we think they've been there for a decade and a half, maybe two,
Mhm.
20 years. You've been printing money for 20 years. No wonder."
Off book. Off
Off
book.
book,
So we
right?
think we're 37 trillion in debt, and then maybe we say, well, with the unfunded liabilities and mandates, it's a couple hundred trillion, but that doesn't include the magic money computers that
No,
there's no
it
record
doesn't.
of.
That's right. So So there's all of this money, all these Federal Reserve notes, ferns floating around in the universe or in our universe. And somehow it's got to get either soaked up or leaked out. It's got to, right?
Yeah,
Because it is the printing of money that
go
makes
somewhere.
inflation go up.
Yeah.
And we know that the value of our Federal Reserve note is about 2 cents compared to what it was in 1913,
Mhm.
112 years ago. So we know the US dollar is basically worthless. So we have to have a reset. It's coming. It cannot not come.
Mhm.
And so for
While all this was going on, and as you said, the spotlight kept moving. It still does, right? So it was on Doge, and then it went down. You didn't hear much about the audit thing, but what we did start to hear about was this huge influx of physical gold and physical silver as the spotlight started turning away from Fort Knox toward Doge. Huge amount, more than ever in the country's history, of amounts of physical gold, physical silver coming into the country. And a concern was that this amount coming in might have been that there was an audit that was behind closed doors, and they realized the shortfall, and that this huge amount of gold coming in and silver, frankly, was to cover what they found
or didn't find.
or didn't find, I should say. Right.
Right. We don't know, we don't
We don't
really know.
know. We don't know.
We don't know.
'Cause-
All we know is that Bob, around the end of January, early February, it was audit the Fed, audit Fort Knox. How much gold do we have? And then it just faded away
Mhm.
as people's attention turned to the next dire thing that was happening.
Right, right.
And so for the last 6 months, I've been highly entertained. I can't say I've not been. I mean, every time President Trump says something, the entire deep state loses their shit. This week it's Jeffrey Epstein.
Right.
Last week, I don't know. I
Yeah,
went to the woods. I
yeah, it was something else.
so every time, and then and
Oh,
then
it was
this is gonna
the
fade
big beautiful
away.
bill. It was the big beautiful bill.
That's right. That's right. I looked at that big beautiful bill and I kind of scratched my head and I said, so President Trump starts out by talking about no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, and no tax on Social Security. Well, the Byrd Act basically states you can't mess with Social Security unless you pass a new bill. So, so they kind of fussed with that in the big beautiful bill, and then it turns out that the Senate version of the BBB allows Americans to deduct about $12,500 for overtime pay, but that means that you're not going to get that money back until after you file your taxes the next year. So instead of just not taxing the money and letting you have it in your wallet straight away, they're mucking about with IRS.
Right.
And the same thing with tips.
Yeah, and the same thing with the senior thing too.
And the seniors, they said, well, we'll give you an extra $6,000, seniors.
Yeah, yeah, but there's like right if you
And that
make
was
less than such and such dollars.
right. If you make more, you're gonna,
Yeah, you're going to pay. You
right,
don't get any of that.
right. So I'm in my head, I'm trying to reconcile no means none.
Right.
So it makes me wonder, since this was the big hubbub about the big beautiful bill,
Right.
what else is in there that we don't know about?
Right. Because it was 994 pages.
1,000 pages doesn't make it a great bill.
Sure doesn't.
So, I mean, so I'm waiting for the other shoe of the centipede to drop.
And the other part of that, I would like your take on this, Robin. We talked about the hazards of debt. It increased the debt ceiling by $5 trillion and increased the deficit over 10 years. Granted, there were several different analyses, but let's say between $2 and $3 trillion.
Yeah. But look, if part of eliminating the deep state's control over us is to eliminate the Federal Reserve and to
Right.
eliminate the IRS, then what do you have to do that?
Mhm.
You've got to make you've got to make the Federal Reserve note absolutely worthless.
Right.
So the only way I can think of doing that is, besides counterfeiting, enter the 14 magic money machines,
Right.
money computers. Other than counterfeiting, it's just to print it into oblivion, a la Weimar Republic from 1920. That's the only way I can think of doing it. Make it absolutely so totally worthless that people beg you for an alternative. Crypto? Not my favorite, because you can't hold it. Gold and silver then.
Or,
It's
as you
gotta be
mentioned before, a U.S. Treasury issued currency that is backed by physical.
okay.
And then in the same process, while you're doing that, as you mentioned, it's listed on the books, every ounce of gold at 42 bucks an ounce. Well, what happens if they say, an ounce of gold we're valuing at $20,000?
Right.
Well, now through, as I understand it, book ledger accounting and the like, you just create all these extra dollars. You could buy back all your outstanding debt, not all of it, but a big chunk of your outstanding debt for
Sure.
that.
Well, Andy Schenkman back in December put out a little blurb. I was amused by it and then intrigued. And he said, if you take the debt
Mhm,
listed on the US debt clock
mhm.
and you divide it by the number of ounces that our 8,100 tons computes to, you get a number in the area of $130,000 an ounce for gold.
But
$130,000 an ounce for gold. Why are we not why are we not considering that?
mhm.
And we both know that the gold and silver markets are completely, totally manipulated. I looked at gold and silver this morning. I
Oh,
think the August calls for gold are somewhere around $3,362 an ounce, and the July calls for silver were almost $38 an ounce. Well, the traditional ratio between gold and silver is like 7 to 1.
mhm, mhm.
And if you do that ratio monetarily for gold and silver, silver turns out to be undervalued by almost 600 bucks an ounce. Yeah, that's how manipulated those markets are.
Mhm.
So I mean, it the prices over in Shanghai for gold and silver are far
Mhm.
different than they are in London or in Chicago.
And that's because Shanghai is based on a physical exchange as opposed to a fraudulent paper exchange.
That's right. That's right.
And
And so
again, this is part of the reset.
right, this is exactly part of the reset. So your friend, I'm editing. Your friend doesn't know shit from Shinola, at least about an economic reset. So if gold and silver over in China are actually valued to um market values, then everybody else has got to catch up. Sooner or later, I'm waiting for the COMEX to run out of gold and silver.
Mhm.
The failure to
Which is
deliver.
based in the United States.
Right,
Mhm.
right. And both Andy
Same in
Shankman
London.
and in London, I've heard Andy Shankman, I've heard Bill Holter, and I've heard other gold and silver true experts. I'm not the expert. I've just listened to them. They've been saying that the it's almost a failure to deliver now out of London because they're making people wait 6 to 8 weeks to get their delivery. 6 to 8 weeks.
No, it's huge. It
So,
used to be 24 to 48 hours.
right, right. And they don't have it. They don't have it to deliver it. So to me, that's a failure to deliver, even though technically, if I get it 8 weeks from now, it's not a failure to deliver. But that's a reset. That's all part of a reset because when those market exchanges can't deliver on their gold and silver, they're done.
Hmm.
And then watch the market value of gold and silver per ounce skyrocket.
And also watch banks implode that are on the other side of that trade, right?
Yes, that's right. The banks that are short on the gold and silver, they're toast.
Hmm.
So, I mean, if is that not a reset?
Yes, it is.
Sounds like a big reset to me.
So President Trump obviously realizes this debt-based system is in the end game. The
Yeah,
problem is he has to thread an incredibly tight needle for a reset to come, not just so that it doesn't have devastating ramifications for millions of people in our country, billions of people around the world.
that's right. It is, man, I admire the guy, I really do, because um that threading of the needle is going to take nerves of solid steel,
Mhm.
really, because he's got to do it such that the economy doesn't collapse, that 300 million Americans don't panic,
Right?
and it's got to be a gentle enough landing that it doesn't look like a Great Depression.
And so that supply chains don't shut down in the
And
process.
so the supply chains don't shut down. I mean, because the economy is an ecosystem. I
Mhm.
keep trying to tell my students, it's not a machine.
Mhm.
It's an ecosystem. I used to call it a swamp, but I don't call it a swamp anymore. But inside of a swamp, if you take one of the elements away, like if you kill off all the mosquitoes, then that has the ripple effects through the swamp that all the other life forms that depend on eating those mosquitoes or the predators of the mosquitoes or the predators of the predators, it's a ripple effect.
Mhm.
And you can't eliminate something out of your ecosystem without impacting via ripple effects everything else. And so, because our entire economy runs on money, you
Mhm.
have to have a money that is sound, that everyone will accept in exchange, that holds its value over time, that you can use to pay off your debts, that you can use as a unit of account. And that's the requirement for a true money. We don't have a true money with the Federal Reserve note
No.
because it does not hold its value over time. And so part of the direction I think that President Trump is taking us is putting us in a position where people are looking at the US Treasury saying, I'm sorry, what was your job again? Maybe you
Mhm.
could do it
Mhm.
finally.
And
And
we're seeing some states actually step up and take matters in their own hands. Florida,
right.
Texas just recently. Texas greenlights gold and silver as legal tender.
Yeah.
House Bill 1056, cleared by both chambers, designates properly marked gold and silver specie, coins, bullion, whatever, as legal tender in the Lone Star State starting September 1st, 2026.
Hmm.
I mean, it's
Well,
big. It's big.
Florida,
And,
Florida,
there are no taxes on it. You can use
right.
it. You want to buy a house, you want to buy a car, yeah, you can use your gold coins, you can use your silver coins. That's legal tender. And we're
Well,
seeing a number of states doing this.
Well, Texas was the first state to contact the New York Federal Reserve way back in, I think it was 2006, to say, give us our gold back. We got $1 billion worth of gold in your vaults. We want it back. And then Texas created their own bullion bank.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee has created their own bullion bank.
Mm-hmm.
Florida just passed legislation making gold and silver legal tender.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee is doing the same thing. So I've been following this since 2020, and there are about 38 states that have done the same things. If not have their own gold bullion bank, then pass legislation making gold and silver legal tender. So I mean, we've got 3/4 of the states that have already moved in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to take that much of another push to get rid of the Federal Reserve. But again, you can't just nix it.
Right.
People will lose their shit
Right.
because there won't be anything that they can see to take the place of those Federal Reserve notes in their wallets.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a it's a very steady plotting in a direction that is going to completely reset our economy. And once we have a US Treasury note that is backed by gold or silver, inflation will vanish, literally
Mm-hmm.
vanish, because they won't be able to print it into oblivion. They
Which is
won't.
what we saw prior to 1913, correct?
In other words, every time they print more notes, the value of your note will go down, and you'll know that because the market value of the gold and silver will go up. So people will be more aware of what's going on with their currency. And that's exactly what we want because we've had now 5.5 generations of people who aren't really connecting the Federal Reserve note with what it buys in an ounce of gold or an ounce of silver.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an education process. It will be a far gentler landing than driving us into a Great Depression.
So, as we end our discussion today, Robin, so that being said, economic reset in the process, then the question is, we understand it's gonna be turbulent at times, it's gonna be bumpy, it's gonna be rough, it's gonna be scary at times. What is the best way for folks to position? You can't even say pre-position at this point.
Right.
Best ways for them at this point to position themselves for this journey to when we land, hopefully not crash land, with the reset.
The very first thing that comes to mind is pay off your debts. Get
Mm.
out of debt as much as possible. Pay off your credit cards, pay off your cars. If you can somehow manage to take that money after having paid off your credit cards and your cars and pay down your house mortgage, do that. Get as far out of debt as you can possibly get and then stay out of debt.
In other words,
And
less dependency on the banking system
right.
that is in the process of being reconfigured. You don't want to be part of that. That's
You really you want to be as far away from that as possible. I would also recommend people buy a little bit of gold and silver.
Mhm.
If you can't buy the gold, buy the silver.
Right.
It's only going to go up in price.
That's right.
It's not going to go down. If it drops $1 or two, buy 4 or 5 ounces,
Hmm.
but buy something.
Hmm.
I'm not a big lover of crypto. It to me it's ethereal. You cannot hold it in your hand. If the internet goes down, you can't spend it. I I personally wouldn't go that way. I would buy gold and silver. I would keep some cash on hand
Yeah.
because even if the economy goes to heck in a handbasket, your cash is still going to buy things locally until the notes get switched out. And because they're not going to do this all at once.
No.
They'll start, say, on the East Coast and they'll ripple it through the system. And so the new US notes that I think we'll be using, those will be rolled out gradually. It's not going to be all at once. So get out of debt, buy some gold and silver, make friends with your neighbors. I've got 3 neighbors who have chickens. We have a lively trade here between canned goods and eggs or whatever we've got on hand. And when you neighbor up like that, you get a good feeling of the people in your just along your street who you can trust and maybe who you shouldn't. Because not everything is going to be smooth.
No.
It's just not. And I know lots of people around me are Second Amendment proponents. You might want to consider doing that as well. Never hurts to be prepared. I guess I hate to sound like a prepper, but I really love Dan Brigman's
Hmm.
attitude of it's better to be prepared and not need it
Hmm.
than to not be prepared and find yourself that you need it.
And that's the storable
So,
food and storable water side. And the reason is
right.
the supply chains break down when resets occur.
That's right. So go to Dan Brigman's Numana.com. He's got some really wonderful foods there. So Adriana Reed, Camino Coin, there's a touch place for you to get your gold and silver. Dan Brigman, be prepared. Be prepared to be on your own for a couple of weeks,
Hmm.
even if it never happens.
Hmm. Hmm. And one of the other sides, and we talk about this with Ron Medikevich, we just recently had him on the show, but communicating. A handheld $25 radio, like Ballfang is a manufacturer, um, works great. Keeps you in the loop. You can listen to shortwave about what's happening and that kind of thing. Um, it can keep you out of harm's way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's all, listen, we used to have a society, and you know this, Dave. My grandmothers and great grandmothers were great preppers.
Yes.
They worked all summer long, planting huge gardens, canning everything under the sun. They even made Christmas cookies in July and then put them away for Christmas time.
Mhm.
So our grandmothers and great grandmothers knew all about prepping because that was the only way not to starve to death. It's okay to do that.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
smart.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's coming. The Great Reset economically is coming. It's not the deep state reset that they want. This is a global reset, getting rid of the deep state, ripping their clutches off of us so that we can become sovereign and free. And part of that being sovereign and free is taking responsibility for your own life and how you want it to go. So you have to start making decisions that you can see the ripple effects of which will be good for you and good for your family. Because we cannot be a free country if we
No,
don't know how to be independent.
that's right.
So
The most effective way to stay in touch 24/7 with Dr. Robin McCutcheon.
go to my website, linksync.com. It's lync-sync.com. That's lync-sync.com. Up at the top are links to radio interviews and classroom lectures, or you can find me at Marshall University.
Robin McCutcheon, I'd like to thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will do for your courage, perseverance, dedication, and sacrifice. And you have kept many, many, many thousands, at this point, millions of people out of harm's way because of your courage and your ability to bring forward great analysis and great information that the vast majority of people in our society maybe don't want to hear, but need to hear. And I thank you. And I thank you folks for joining us. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.